A story of 10 Mile Gulch from Romance of California Life by John Habberton. This is recorded to celebrate the 10th anniversary of LibriVox. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 1. The horse which Mr. Tom Ruger rode kept the path, steep and rugged though it was, without any guidance from him, and his mate followed demurely. They were accustomed to it, and many a mile had they traversed in this way, taking turns at carrying their owner and master. Indeed, the trial seemed inseparable, and as happy as Tom Ruger and his horses was a phrase that was very often heard in every mining camp and settlement. As for Mr. Tom Ruger himself, very little was known of him, save what had been learned during the 2 years that he had sojourned among them. Where he came from never was known nor asked but once by the same person. All that could be said of him might be summed up in the following statement: the finest looking, the best dressed, and the best mannered man on the Pacific coast, and the best horseman. These were the words of mine host at the 10 Mile house, and as he was a gentleman whose word was as good as his paper, we will accept them as truth. As Mr. Ruger rode down the mountainside that beautiful autumn day, dressed in the finest of broadcloth, with linen of the most immaculate whiteness, smoking what appeared to be a very good cigar, and humming to himself a fragment of some old song, he looked strangely out of place. So thought Miss Fanny Borland as she looked out of the stage window and caught a first glimpse of him just where his path intersected the stage road, and she would have asked the driver about him had he not been so near. Mr. Ruger caught sight of her face about that time, and tossing away the cigar, he lifted his hat to her in the most approved style. She acknowledged the salute by a bow, and when he rode up to the side of the stage and made some casual remark about the fine weather, she did not choose to consider it out of the way to receive this advance toward a traveling acquaintance with seeming cordiality. "Have you traveled far?" he asked. "From the Atlantic coast, sir." "The same journey that I intend to take some of these days, only that I hope to substitute the word Pacific at its termination. I hope you are near the end of your journey in this direction?" "My destination is 10 Mile Gulch, I believe, but you have such horrid names out here. I presume they do appear somewhat queer to a stranger, but they nearly all have the merit of being appropriate. You stop at a settlement?" "I do not know. My brother wrote to me to come to 10 Mile Gulch. Is it the name of a town?" "Both of a village and a mining district from which the village takes its name. Is your brother a miner?" "Yes, sir." "I presume he intended to meet you at the settlement. You will no doubt find him at the tavern. If not, I will tell him of your arrival, for my way leads through the mines." "Thank you, sir. My brother's name is John Borland." "I am somewhat acquainted with him," said Mr. Kruger, "though in this region of strange names I call him Jack. My name is Thomas Ruger." "Tom, in California style?" she asked, with a merry twinkle in her eye. "Yes, Miss Borland," he said, also smiling. "Tom Ruger is well known where Thomas Ruger never was heard of. And now I will bid you good day, Miss Borland, for I am in something of a hurry to reach the settlement. If I do not find Jack there, I will go on to the mines and tell him." "Ah, miss, you don't have such men as Tom Ruger out where you come from," said the driver, as Tom disappeared up the road, "and them nags of his'n can't be beat this side of the mountains. He makes a heap o' money with 'em." "What? A horse jockey?" exclaimed Miss Borland. "We don't call him that, miss. Some says he's a sporting man, which is nothing agin him, for the country's new, you see. He's got heaps of money anyway, and there ain't a camp nor a town on the coast that don't know Tom Ruger. Ah, you don't have such men as Tommy. He'd be at home in a palace now, wouldn't he? And it's just the same in the miner's shanty. I don't have such men as he. If he takes a liking to anybody, it sticks to him through thick and thin. But if he gets again it once, he's very deuce. Ah, you don't have no such men out where you come from. She did not care to dispute this point. In fact, after what she had seen and heard, she was inclined to believe that there was no such man as Tom Ruger out where she had come from. So she made no reply, and the driver, following out his train of thought, rattled on about Tom Ruger until they came in sight of 10 Mile Gulch, winding up his narrative with a sage but rather unexpected remark that there weren't no such man as Tom Ruger out where she had come from. 2. The barroom and the miner's home might have been more crowded at some former period of its existence, but to have duplicated the 2 dozen faces and forms of the 2 dozen 10-milers who were congregated there that beautiful autumn afternoon would have been a hopeless task. 10 Mile Gulch had turned out en masse, and those same 10-milers were distinguished neither for their good looks, nor taste in dress, nor softness of heart or language, nor elegance of manners. Further than that, we do not care to go at present. But there was one face and one form absent. No more would the genial atmosphere of the barroom respond to the heavings of his broad chest. No more would the dignified concocter of rare and villainous drinks pass him the whiskey straight. Alas, Bill Foster had passed in his checks and gone the way of all 10-milers. And it was this fact that brought these diligent delvers after hidden treasure from their work, for Bill had not gone in the ordinary way. At night he was in the full enjoyment of health and the game of poker. In the morning they found him just outside the domicile of Jack Borland, with a small puncture near the heart to tell how it was done. Such was life at 10 Mile Gulch. Who made the puncture? Circumstances pointed to Jack Borland, and they escorted him down to the settlement. He stood by the bar conversing with the dispenser of liquid lightning. 2 very calm-looking 10-milers were within easy reach of Mr. Borland. 2 more at the door, which was left temptingly open. 2 more at each window, and the remainder scattered about the room to suit themselves. Mr. Bob Watson was the only one calm enough to enjoy a seat, and he was whittling away at the pine bench with such energy that a stranger might have concluded that whittling was his best hold. Not so, however. He whittled until he found a nail with the edge of his knife, and then varied his diversion by grasping the point of the blade between the thumb and first finger of his right hand, and then throwing it at the left eye of a very flattering representation of Yankee Sullivan which graced the wall. By a slight miscalculation of distance and elevation, the eye was unharmed, but the well-developed nose was more effectually ruined than its original ever was by the most scientific pugilist. "Well, gentlemen, what shall we do with the prisoner?" asked Watson. "We are waiting for you," said the tall 10-miler, who had been a pleased witness of the knife-throwing and its results. "Well, you need not," retorted Mr. Watson, as he made a Flynn and the Yankee's other eye, and with very good success. "You know my sentiments, gentlemen. I was opposed to bringing the prisoner here. We might have fixed up the matter all at one time, and saved a heap of digging." "He might have done," said the tall miler, doubtfully, "but I wouldn't like to see the two together. It would spoil all my enjoyment of the occasion." "Bet you 10 to 1 you don't swing him," cried Watson, springing to his feet with sudden inspiration, and mounting the bench he had been whittling. 20 to 1, Jack Borland don't choke this heat. Who takes me? Who? Who? No one seemed disposed to take him. Bosh! You 10-milers are all babies. Now, if this had happened up at Quit Claim, Borland would have had a beautiful tombstone over him long ago. What do you say, Borland? The prisoner, thus addressed, cut short some remark he was making and turned to Watson. There have been cases where the prisoner had the benefit of a trial, Mr. Watson. Which is so, Mr. Borland. Obliged to you for reminding me. Let's have one, gentlemen. I'll be prosecuting attorney, if no one objects. Now, who will defend the prisoner at the bar? I'll make a feeble attempt that way, was the reply that came from the doorway. All eyes turned, and recognized Tom Ruger. This is betwixt us 10-milers, said Watson. Borland is guilty, and we're bound to hang him before sundown. But we want to do the fair thing and give him the benefit of a trial. Who of you 10-milers will defend him? I told you I would defend Mr. Borland, said Tom Ruger, as he removed his silk hat and wiped his broad forehead with the finest of silk handkerchiefs. Until we won't have any outsiders in this game, said Watson. I really dislike to contradict you, Mr. Watson, remarked Tom Ruger, as he very carefully readjusted his hat. Very sorry, Mr. Watson, and I do hope you will pardon me when I repeat that I would defend Mr. Borland with my life. This remark surprised no one more than Jack Borland. He had never spoken to Mr. Ruger a dozen times in his life, and he could not account for such disinterestedness. However, there was not much time for conjecture, for Mr. Watson had taken offense. With your death, Tom Ruger, if you interfere, cried Watson, jumping down from his elevation. It did look that way, but Mr. Ruger had not strode up and down that auriferous coast without acquiring some knowledge of the usual means of defense in that sunny clime, as well as some practice. It was quite warm for a moment. Then Mr. Borland, believing it to be his duty as client to aid his counsel in the defense, went in gladly. Still, it was quite warm, also somewhat smoky from the powder that had been burned, likewise noisy. Not so noisy, however, that Mr. Borland could not hear his counsel say, "Clear yourself, Borland. My horse is down at the ford." Mr. Borland followed the advice of his counsel, and Mr. Ruger followed Mr. Borland. The 10-milers, some of them, followed both counsel and client. It was neck and heels until the horses were reached. After that, the pursuers were left at a great disadvantage. "I'll have his heart," ejaculated Watson, which heart he meant we have no means of knowing. "Give me a horse, quick." They brought a mule. "Wait here, every man of you," Watson shouted back over the shaved tail of his substitute for a horse. "I'll bring him back, dead or alive, or my name ain't Watson." And over the way the stage had stopped, and Fanny Borland had reached 10-Mile Gulch at last. 3. A little after sunrise the next morning, Mr. Tom Ruger might have been seen leisurely riding along the bridle path between the mines and the settlement of 10-Mile Gulch. He was headed toward the village, and was 9 3/4 miles nearer to it than the mines. He had found another good cigar somewhere, and was humming the self-same tune as on the previous afternoon. But the riderless horse was not with him. As Mr. Ruger rode into the only street in the village, his approach was heralded, and the 10-milers who were waiting for Watson's return filed out of the miner's home and took stations in the street. Mr. Ruger took note of this demonstration and, with a very businesslike air, examined the contents of his holsters. He also noticed that patched noses and heads and canes and crutches were the predominating features in the group of 10-milers, with an occasional closed eye and a bandaged hand to vary the monotony. Miss Fanny Borland, from her window at the 10-Mile house, also noticed the dilapidated looks of the frequenters of the miners' home, and wondered if they kept a hospital there. Then she saw Mr. Ruger, and bowed and smiled as he drew up at her window. "So you arrived all safe, Miss Borland. How do you like the place?" "Better than the inhabitants," she answered, with a glance over the way. "Than those, I mean." "Is it a hospital?" "For the present, I believe it is. And will be for some time to come, if they all stay till they're cured." "But have you seen Jack?" "Yes, last evening. He was very sorry that he could not wait for you, but he may be as well, however. He has gone down to San Francisco, and he will wait for you there. The stage leaves here in about 2 hours, and I advise you to take passage in it if you are not too much fatigued." "I'm not tired a bit, Mr. Cougar. I will go back. Thank you for the trouble you have taken." "No trouble, Miss Borland. I'll give my respects to Jack, and tell him I will be down in a week or two. Good morning." While talking, Mr. Ruger had about evenly divided his glances between the very beautiful face of Fanny Borland and the somewhat expressive countenances of the 10-milers. Not that he found anything to admire in their damaged physiognomies, but he never wholly ignored the presence of anyone. "Good morning, gentlemen," he said, as he rode up in front of them. "Not to you, Tom Ruger," spoke a tall 10-miler, the only one, by the way, who had come out of the previous day's trial unscathed. "Not to you, Tom Ruger. Where's Borland?" "He's gone down the coast on business," said Ruger, "and may not be back for several months." "We'll not wait for him," was the miner's reply. At the same time he drew a revolver. "You had better wait," said Ruger, also producing a revolver. The 10-miler paused and looked around at his companions. They did not present a formidable array of fighting stock. In fact, they were the sorriest-looking men the 10-Mile Gulch ever saw. And as the unscathed surveyed them, he seemed to think he had better wait. "You'll wait for Mr. Borland?" queried Ruger. "I reckon we'd better," answered the unscathed. "And while you are waiting, you had better take a cursory glance at Mr. Watson," suggested Ruger. "At the present time he is reposing in the shade of an acacia bush, just back of the late lamented William Foster's rural habitation. Good morning, gentlemen, and don't get impatient." If Mr. Ruger had any fear of treachery, he did not exhibit it, for he never turned his head as he rode off toward the valley. Nor was there any danger, for beneath his suggestions about Mr. Watson, the unscathed had detected a thing or two. "I'm glad we waited," he said. "I begin to see a thing or two. Then, as is able, will follow me up the gulch." About half a score went with him. Mr. Watson was still enjoying the shade of the acacia bush. In fact, he couldn't get away, which Mr. Ruger well knew. "It's all up with me, Gulchers," whispered Watson. "Ruger was too many for me, and ought to have known it. You'll find Bill Foster's dust in a flour sack in my cabin. My respects to Borland when you see him, and tell him I beg his pardon for discommoding him. Give what dust is honestly mine to him. That's all I can do now. Goodbye, boys. I'm just played out. But take my advice and never buck against Tom Ruger. He's too many for any dozen chaps on the coast. I knew it was all up with me the minute Tom came in, for he can look right through a feller's heart. But never mind, it's too late to help you now. I staked everything I had against Foster's pile, and I'm beat, beat, beat. These were the last words Mr. Bob Watson ever spoke, as many are surviving Tom Miller will tell you, and they buried him in the spot where he died, without any beautiful stone to mark the place. 4. Miss Fanny Borland found Jack awaiting her at San Francisco. What made you run away? Why, Fanny, didn't Tom tell you about it? Queried Jack. Tom? Oh, you mean Mr. Ruger. He only sent me down here. Just like him, Fan. Very few words he ever wastes. Ah, sister, we don't have such men out east. So the stage driver told me, said Fanny demurely. There, Fan, you're poking fun now. Wait till I get through. Only for Tom, you would have found me at 10 Mile Gulch, hanging by the neck to the limb of that tree just in front of the home. Hanging, Jack. Hanging, Fan. Lynched for a murder I never committed. Tom came along just in the nick of time. And, well, Fan, perhaps you saw some of the 10-milers before you came away. Yes, Jack. And there was only one whole nose in the lot, and I do believe that was out of joint. But oh, Jack, if they had taken your life. Never mind now, sis. Tom was too many for 'em, and here I am safe. We'll wait here till Tom comes down, for I've got one of his horses, which he thinks more of than he does of himself. Then for home, sis. Mr. Tom Ruger went down, as he said he would, and remained with them several days. On the morning that they were to sail, Fanny said to Tom, I wish you were going with us, Mr. Ruger. We shall miss you very much. Won't you go? Mr. Ruger was talking with Jack at the time, but he heard Fanny. He always heard what she said. He did not reply at once, however, but said to Jack, in a low tone, Jack, you know what I have been. Can I ever become worthy of her? And Jack answered promptly, God bless you, Tom. You are worthy now. Thank you, Jack. If you believe. Then he went over to Fanny. I will go, was all he said. It was a great wonder to both Jack and his sister how Tom could have got ready for the journey on so short a notice. But one day, more than a year afterward, Tom said to Jack, Old friend, I am not what I was, I hope. Ever since I first saw Fanny on the road to 10 Mile Gulch, I have tried to live differently. I hope I am better, for she said last night that she would take me for better or worse. And Jack wondered no more. End of A Story of 10 Mile Gulch by John Habberton. Read by Aaron Walsh.